So welcome everybody. The topic of today is how to fight cyber attacks. 2022 is a year where we could see that Europe maybe finally is taking cybersecurity more seriously, at least in France and Germany. In Rennes, for example, today 4,000 guests are gathering for the European Cyber Week. I think that, for example, CybelAngel and Tehtris, maybe also GateWatcher, are there. Jean-Noël Barrot, the Minister of Digital Transition, just announced 30 million euros for various projects on top of 20 million euros following a cyber attack on a hospital. And the idea is really to foster the topic cybersecurity in SMEs and local places. But at the same time, it looks like the FT 120, all of these startups did not wait for a government initiative to talk about cybersecurity. I was very surprised when I was looking at who is in charge of cybersecurity in many companies and startups to see, wow, there are whole departments. It looks like it's taken seriously already by a lot of companies and more than I thought. So it looks like you have been hiring a lot, everybody. In Germany, there was at the end of October also this ITSA conference in Nuremberg. They had 15,000 trade visitors with 700 companies from 29 countries, a huge success, showing also that there is a big interest for the topic, and also there is also some government interest, for example, the Krankenhaus Zukunftsgesetz with 4.3 billion euros for digitization of the hospitals in Germany, and 15% of it, so 645 million euros, should be dedicated to cybersecurity. So it looks like there is a huge market, both private, public, and what can we do of it? I guess a lot of startups and scale-ups, and you are here today, can benefit from this boom. And I would love to have each of you introduce yourself. Who wants to start?
Ladies first.
I can start. Yeah, hi there, everyone. I'm Fabiula, co-founder and CEO of SecFix. We basically help companies get and stay compliant with standards such as ISO 27001, GDPR, SOC 2, TISAX for the automotive industry. And we do that in weeks rather than months, so companies can spend, instead of spending 12 months, they can do it with us in 6 weeks. Yeah, super excited to be here today.
And you are from Munich, right?
Yeah, well, I'm from El Salvador, but we are basically based in Berlin and Munich. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Stefanie?
Yes, hi, my name is Stefanie Witting. I'm territory manager with GateWatcher. It's a French company founded in 2015. And myself, I'm working since over 15 years now in the IT security. And I'm your contact in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland for everything what's concerning network detection and response. I guess it's known under a lot of names, like before it's called intrusion detection or NTA. But basically what it does is giving visibility about the network, which is in security a lot of importance, as we have a lot of ransomware and APTs going around. So if any question, nice to be here.
Thank you. Who is next?
I can go. Hey guys. Stefan's the name. My very important title, I think it's Country Director DACH. So I'm in charge of the market, Germany, Austria, Switzerland here. Me personally, I've been in this industry for about 15 years now. I've been a geek all my life. So being in a commercial role is okay-ish, but I'm a technician at heart. My first computer when I was 6, and I consider myself a geek for many, many years. Sometimes is annoying for myself and other people, but regarding CybelAngel, what we do is called external attack service management or monitoring, which is a bit, originates a little bit this attack surface from Mitra attack. That's what it's called these days, but it goes back to the good old Lockheed Martin kill chain approach. Reconnaissance, weaponization, attack. And so we're looking at attack surfaces. We're looking at digital risks for companies. which originate from, leaked data, which might be weaponized against you, OSINT information, infrastructure problems in your potential perimeter or attack surface. It's a very wide area. Let's say it's quite broad what it is we do, and the use cases for our clients are quite different. But that's us.
Fantastic. Olaf?
Yeah, hi, my name is Olaf. I'm from Tehtris. I have the same title like Stefan. I'm head of DACH. And the same for me. I'm head of sales and services, but I'm also a certified security officer and also lead auditor for TSOX, for ISO, Fabiula, hi, and also for the BSI, IT-Sicherheitsgesetz, also CRITIS, paragraph 8a. And so we are a French company, but today we say we are a European company with the roots in France. So it's very important. And we have, if you want to know what we are doing, maybe if you're taking a look on the paper the German BSI sent out in June 2022, this will have been a little guidance for companies and also public environments, what they have to do in automatic detection and neutralization of attacks. And if you take this paper of the BSA, scratch out the logo and put in our logo of Tehtris, then you know what we are doing. That's what we are doing with all of our customers. We are really helping them to automatic detect and neutralize the attacks in real time. And I think that's at the moment the most important thing we can do. And we just signed our BC. That means we have also investors in the background, and very, I think, very good to know is these investors are not from China, not from the US. They are real European investors, and the goal for our company and for the next years is really to protect the European Union and the European business and also public environments. Our focus in Germany at the moment is not only hospitals, but especially they call it the critical sector, where also in hospitals are integrated. Yes, that's true. And I think this is at the moment the most important stuff we have to protect. And for us as a sales organization, the low-hanging fruits, because they have to do something now, not in the next years. They have to do something now. They have the money, and so that's why we are here to protect Europe and Germany. Thank you.
Fantastic. Benjamin?
Great. I feel very well at home what Stefan said. I also got my first computer when I was 9. I had no friends until I was 15 besides my computer. I would consider myself a nerd as well. And I started my first company when I was 17. Ever been since in the tech space. Successfully failed with an IPO in 2001, was part of a company that went public in 2004 in the management, and we grew the company to 1,200 people around the world, where we mostly worked for mobile network operators in their infrastructure, communications, payment, security. Then started as a business angel investing in tech startups in Europe, joined the VC fund as a partner, started an entrepreneurship center in 2014 in Berlin, and got convinced by our founder of Monarch in 2019 that it is time to bring together the brightest minds in Europe to support digital sovereignty in Europe and beyond. And we started Monarch just in 2021 as a company that is supporting government and critical infrastructure companies in their efforts for either protecting democracy, defending critical infrastructure, or enabling strategic intelligence and operations. And we act as a platform, a layer between the ecosystem and the clients. And we help them to operate and source the appropriate solutions. So we always look at our clients' problems and try to find the right solutions. So we're not a consultancy, and we're also not a software company. We are somewhere in between.
So that's interesting what you're saying, and maybe we can start with the topic digital sovereignty. And it's not only about the fact that Europe needs like European cybersecurity tools. What I understand from you, Benjamin, is actually that the expertise and independence of Europe is also attractive for countries outside of Europe, correct? Like if Irak, for example, or the United Nations have to choose one company to audit and guarantee the security, the cybersecurity of an election, they chose you also because you are not American, correct?
Exactly, yes. So we met in November 2020, the Iraqi Prime Minister, when he was on a visit to Berlin, London, and Paris to meet European companies that actually could support the security, the audit, and the hardening of their electoral systems. And they were particularly looking for European companies being capable of doing so. Because they also wanted to signal that they have emancipated themselves from the United States. It was very difficult for them to find actual companies in Europe that have the knowledge and the expertise. But as we are a German-British company, we can rely on the one hand side on the strengths and the networks of the Brits, but also on the soft power and diplomacy efforts of Germany. And I think that was a compelling advantage over others. And in fact, our team was the only one willing to go on the ground, have a look at the electronic voting equipment. Everybody else tried to do this very remotely from their 20th floor office tower, wherever. So I think that's definitely a USP in today's world if you are a European company and able to offer that kind of services.
What about you, Olaf? You said earlier that Tehtris is more European than French. So there is also now this European brand and identity that is very important for your customers here in France and Germany.
Yeah, so we are not only opening some locations now in Spain and in DACH in Munich. We also just opened last week in the Nordics, the next branch. But yeah, it's true that also we are opening the branch in Montreal and also in Tokyo, and for the Asia region. And yeah, there's a lots of customers and also public environments. They have to think about who is. So I'm doing the business worldwide, and they have to think about who is my competitor. If the competitor maybe is more in the United States, then you have to think about what you're using for IT security software. That's the fact. That's the reason, and that I think that's why also really European companies have a good chance. Also, not only doing the business in France or in the DACH market, also in Asia and also in the African countries around EMEA.
Okay. Anybody wants to react more on digital sovereignty? Otherwise, I go to my next question.
Maybe without talking about specific companies, but having a little bit of a broader approach on this topic. Even if companies are currently offering pseudo-European services, I think the challenge we always have is that there's being subservices included, which originate from the US. This is nothing they openly say out loud, but there's a whole bunch of services, SDKs and APIs lying underneath, which are very much not sovereign. And I think this is something that needs to be considered also. It doesn't help if you have a German car, which gets its gearbox from the US. It breaks from, I don't know if you've seen the news yesterday about the SDK originating, or day before yesterday, beginning of the week, there's certain SDK which for push notifications, which originates in Russia, and nobody really has noticed that they've built it in their apps all over the world. So if you really talk about sovereignty, you have to take a very close look also at subsystems and all the components you're implementing.
Super interesting. And so maybe you can continue also with you, Stefan, about like what changed, let's say, compared to a few years ago, maybe before the pandemic or even 10 years ago. Why is cybersecurity so different? What's the big difference? Because you're also an expert on that topic for quite a long time. What's the difference between 2022 and three years ago or 10 years ago?
I think 10 years ago, the difference was very much that viruses had a completely different approach. It was just about to point fingers at vulnerabilities of certain systems without any commercial implications. And today, the perception of an APT is completely wrong in the public perception. They still think there's this 40-year-old.
Sorry, can you precise what APT means?
Advanced persistent threat. So this means, let's keep things simple. Basically, someone who's trying to attack you. In some cases, it's governmental organizations. It might be APT groups which have a governmental background. Let's not get into this too deep. Let's just say the bad guys that are trying to attack you these days. And people still have this perception of some 14-year-old in a hoodie sitting in the dark looking at a green screen, which is completely wrong. It's in most cases, it's commercial organizations which are copying established business models. And, there's corporations, there's integrations between systems. And this is a big difference. Let's say.
So it's more professional.
I'm sorry?
So it's more professional now.
Yeah, it's being commercialized. And that's a big difference. Yeah, exactly. You have malware as a service, you have dashboards, you have service hotlines, and I'm not kidding. And these days, anyone with, let's say, a malicious intent is able to build a malware attack of any kind, pretty much, without being able to code a single line. And that's a big difference.
So it's easier to ask somebody to attack somebody else, but also the perimeter changed, right?
Exactly. That's the second point. First of all, let's talk about the vector and someone and the way people are being attacked these days, and then let's talk about the infrastructure and design of systems. Most people these days, they still have the same philosophy in place they had 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Pretty much, there's a perimeter. We take all our systems and all our information, we put it in the middle of the table, we build a high wall, we call it the perimeter, we protect that wall using a whole bunch of many fancy three acronym systems like gateways, DLP, various IDS, IPS systems, you name it. But the challenge today is that the system and information landscape is so heterogeneous and so complex that you can't really determine where is my perimeter. And therefore, if you don't know where something is, how are you going to protect it efficiently? And that's a big change these days.
Stefanie, do you want to react?
I'm totally agree. There's a lack of visibility in the whole network and in the whole surrounding. And I mean, we have another problem too. And not only that, a lot of people are believing that like 10 years ago, everything is okay if they have a just urban protection or fancy stuff, whatever. But I mean, it's all together. A solution is not just one thing to protect you. It's a combination mostly of several security solutions. And I've seen the awareness is coming now even to Germany. I'm working especially with Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, and I got to say that like talking about network protection or something like that a couple of years ago, there was not much awareness. They said, okay, I have a firewall, I have antivirus, it's going to protect me, but you don't only have, you have traffic, internal traffic, a lot more than they had before. And APTs, for example, just to come back to the subject, they are not knocking on the door, staying in front and being visible all the time. So they more or less know your network, find out your weaknesses, and you have to have a certain visibility on everything to know where they can hide or to see the behavior of APTs, for example. That's a very important point in my eyes. Not only protect, I mean, if you have a house, you don't protect just the front door, but you have to protect also the windows and the back door or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of things to do. And another thing in Germany, what I can see is the resources, lack of resource of people that know security, that are able to use all the techniques that are in use to know all the technologies. I see a lot of people are looking for new people to hire to protect their environment, but it's really a problem at the moment to find new people to hire, especially.
Fabiula, do you want to react to this? Because what you are proposing is also like a product on the shelf that enables also companies that don't have a cybersecurity expert to nevertheless reach this ISO 27001. Can you explain what is this this certification, and how can a company without any expert nevertheless get that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I definitely agree on all of the points that were said before, especially like during the pandemic. I've seen that the awareness of, security has been like put on the priority list of the top management, which didn't have happen before the pandemic. Before it was just like, yeah, we have, as Stefanie said, we have a firewall, and yeah, we have an antivirus installed, so we're safe. But yeah, now it's mostly more about not only getting one part secured of your company, but rather, like the whole organization, like the people behind it, and also like all the systems that you have in place. So you definitely need to have, that's why those frameworks like ISO 27001 or GDPR, SOC 2 are there, because they give you like a first guidance on what companies need to do to be able to get started with that. So yeah, in general, like what ISO 27001 tries to do here is that for any company that needs to show some kind of like trust, I would say, standard to be able to work with, for example, bigger companies like enterprises. This helps them to basically just kind of like show that they are protected and that they are following these security processes. The main challenge here is that many companies, especially like the smaller ones, they have no idea on what they need to do when they get started. They also don't have the resources, as Stefanie said, they don't have the budget. So it's a very huge basically project that will take them like at least 12 months to finish. And it's very tedious. You need to do a lot of manual work. You need to document a lot of things, for example, policies, understand like how do your, for example, for startups, like how do you work remotely, how do you do teleworking, how do you protect your endpoints as security devices. Like there are a lot of things that are very new, like also this whole trend of going into the cloud that nobody has really been able to assess what's necessary to be able to be secure. So there are a lot of challenges and a lot of question marks. And that's basically one of the things why, for example, such standards are important, because they give them this guideline. And what we do, or what SecFix does in this case, is kind of like just make it even a bit easier for everyone to understand. So kind of like we are like a solution that can give them a checklist of the things that they need to do, like a first cybersecurity roadmap, so to say, on how to get started, how to set up everything, which policies they need to set up, and kind of like, take them by the hand and say like, hey, you are not alone in this. I know before like the pandemic, this might not be like the hottest topic that you had on the table, but now it has come the time that you need to implement it, and we're here to help. So yeah, like there's a lot of awareness out there, and there's a lot of, especially smaller companies that I've seen, like even our customers, they just started, they just literally just register the company, and the first thing that they do is to get their ISO 27001 certification in place. Because now every time you want to close a deal with a company, even if it's a small or a big one, they ask you about the certifications. So doing it from the beginning in a very clean way is actually like the best way that companies can do so far. Obviously, it's not going to protect you against everything, because in the end, you need to think about every single part. And this is just like really the, I would say, first level just to get started. But then you need to go very deep into each topic. For example, you need to, let's say, conduct penetration testing like every, at least twice a year, or do automated pen tests also on a regular basis, bug bounty programs. So there are different things that go like further into details after you've set up those processes.
And do you also work with auditors, or you don't need an auditor to get the ISO certification in the end?
Yeah, you do. So you basically work with, for example, consultants, or also with basically automation tools like SecFix to just kind of like get through the implementation process, which is like the tedious one. And then there's like an audit phase, which is what's conducted. For example, we have partners like, for example, TÜV or other different partners as well in Germany, UK, and different countries. And they are the ones that will issue the certification. So after you have done the audit with them, you get the certificate. But then you can start using it for, showing that you're basically already a very secure company. And then after 1 year, you need to conduct a surveillance audit, which is kind of like also one of the challenges, because obviously every year the auditor will come and they will basically check that you have everything in place. So yeah, we kind of like also help them maintain that.
Does it mean that my question is also, can I get this certification without purchasing the services of a company like GateWatcher, CybelAngel, or Tehtris? Or is it like a must-have? Like I must also purchase services from external companies. It's not only just like check boxes. It's also, I also have to implement one of these solutions.
Yeah. So this is like actually like the main goal of the ISO framework, and obviously depending on the auditor, but from the auditors I know, they're all like accredited. They are all basically coming from the same institution that checks that everything is compliant of what they are checking. And one of the things that the auditor will check is not only if you're putting in paper that you have implemented all of this. Let's say that you have password manager, but you have never actually installed it in the computers. So what they're going to do is that they're going to check, hey, if you have installed a password manager, can you please show to me, like, how is this password manager running in your employee computers? How are you checking that this is activated? Or for example, if you have employees in the company and you have mentioned that they do regular security awareness training, you need to show that they have done a security awareness training with a provider, and that they have, issued a certificate for the security awareness training. So this comes for every single service. They need to actually show evidence on that.
Maybe we can move to Benjamin. Like, you work also abroad where there is no ISO certification. How do you work? Because you are also doing some kind of audit. How do you do that?
Well, in some things that we do, there's no ISO certification process involved or required. If you're talking about the electoral audit that we talked about briefly in the beginning of the call, is essentially to reduce the number of vulnerabilities and to reach a practical exploitability of 0 for the remaining vulnerabilities in an electoral system, to have a proper report that not only United Nations can use, but that also in the end upholds a court case where the results of the election has been contested and proven that the entire electoral process has been accurate. So this has nothing to do with an audit that you would recall from an ISO 271 process.
Okay. And Olaf, you are an auditor. Do you see a difference, like a before and after in companies, before and after such a certification process?
Yes, today it's much more reasonable than 10 years before. But maybe again, I want to mix lots of questions in the last 5 minutes. Maybe we can mix it a little bit. First of all, the ISO certification is, in easy words, is a kind of list of actions. If you do this, then you get the chance to have a kind of minimal security for your company. That's very important, because you can just work on the list, and that's what the auditor is doing. Then you check what they did, and then, for example, no company like CybelAngel or GateWatcher or also Tehtris can tell if you buy Tehtris, then you are ISO certified. That means always you need Tehtris, GateWatcher, and CybelAngel in a combination. That's it. And then maybe if you take a look on solutions, for example, we started 10 years before as an EDR company. This would be then only maybe then 3 points of this action list for ISO certification. Today we are EDR, SIEM, NTA, honeypots, so everything in one platform.
EDR,
that means
it's
maybe
like
then
endpoint detection and response, correct? EDR.
Yes, thank you. Yes.
And then you were talking about SIEM. It's like security information and event management. Can you maybe also explain shortly what that means?
Yeah, okay, no problem. Maybe if you're an auditor, you don't consult the customer. You always ask for what you have to do is you have to use the state of the art of technique. And if you take a look and somewhere on the last 10 years, then it starts maybe 10 years before with there have been maybe antivirus and also and a firewall have been state of the art. That what everybody was using then. And then maybe then the EDR, the endpoint detection response, started maybe then in 2015, 2016 as a new technology. And also the SIEM, what we talked before, the security information event management tool, which is collecting all the logs, all the events you are producing by users or by services, that's then be collected. And today, if you take a look what is today a state of the art, then it is the combination of all these sources then to have the chance to really to correlate what happens in the network, what happens in the logs, in the events, and what happens directly on the client. And this is what really brings them the chance together. That's why the auditors or also BSI is telling us today that the state of the art today is XDR, which combines all of these 3 sources and technologies. And then again, one sentence maybe to the attackers. We just also talked about honeypots. We are fighting always every day, every minute, every second against attackers, and we have implemented all over the world our local regional honeypots just to see what happens in the world, because in every country there are other persons who are attacking, there are other groups who attack, they have several their own fingerprints. Then they maybe see in October much more interest into the critical infrastructure, and then maybe then 1 week later much more in banking groups. So that's what we implemented, and we could also see when for example, just to give you a picture of this, we saw a big reaction and big difference when the conflict between Russia and Ukraine starts. Because one of the biggest business owner in the ransomware attacks is at the moment the Russian mafia. And then with and lots of Ukraine hackers worked for the Russian mafia. And then while the attack starts, they have to decide, okay, once they still want to work for Russia or for Ukraine. And lots of them then switched over to Ukraine to protect their own country. And then they also then spread out the information how the Russia mafia is working and what they're using and all this kind of stuff. And we saw really the amount of attacks goes down in the first 3 months, and now it's starting again. So it's really a big business. The business is paid by Bitcoin, and this is what happens at the moment in the world. Yes.
Benjamin, maybe you want to react to that. Do you see a big change in the last 6 months with the war in Ukraine?
I've recently been involved in a similar discussion with which was not public, but some of the biggest DACH CISOs were involved there, and I can only tell you what they told me or what they all agreed on, that since the attack on Ukraine from Russia, attacks on the infrastructure have about quadrupled. So there's a lot more going on than it was like before January, February. And this is something it's not proven numbers. It's just experience from CISOs from top 10 DAX companies.
Yeah, but can you read it in the news all the time? I totally agree, Stefan. You can read it in the news and everywhere. I mean, just on the public, just public on the internet, you can find 16 attacks just in Germany in October. And there's again two other attacks just in November, and we just started November more or less. So there's a lot more going on, and that's why everybody is more out to secure the network and the environment, the whole environment. And totally agree with Olaf too. Just one solution won't make it. That's why everybody is supposed to place more or less like everything working together. And that's what Olaf said as a CM solution, as well as NDR and EDR.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Fabiula, do you also... sorry, Stefan?
Yeah, I'd like to pick up a point maybe from taking, I don't know, maybe a broader view on the last topic, and it's my personal opinion, but I think there's two main problems. The first one is lack of awareness, and the second one is lack of competence or lack of expertise, whatever you want to call that. And the problem is that these days, if you're a company, there's a whole bunch of sales guys waltzing in, telling people, this is what you need, and then everything's going to be fine. And it's just a blunt lie, if you ask me. And people are not educated enough, and they don't have the expertise to call their bullshit. And as long as the market is in the hand of salespeople trying to push their own solutions, there's not going to be a holistic protection for anyone, because nobody is really able to understand what's going on. And they all talk to these very eloquent, confident, trained monkeys who tell them, this is what you need. And I think this is something which then relates to a general education and awareness. And I think that's what's lacking, massively lacking today. And if I look, just look at the people around you who are not working in this industry. And most people don't even use a bloody password manager, which is the very, very basic of what you do to protect yourself. And as long as we're at this stage, both on personal level and on company level, especially in the German Mittelstand, you have these hidden champions with 60 employees who are, milling titanium parts for NASA, who have a whole bunch, like they're sitting on mountains of IP. And there's this 65-year-old senior owner who says, we don't need a new server. It's fine. It's been doing a great job for the last 15 years. And this is the problem, lack of awareness with people rolling in and telling them what to buy.
So the lack of the willingness to purchase the right infrastructure, right?
Not the lack of, that's one part. And the second part is lack of competence and lack of expertise. What's needed is basically, from my point of view, I don't know how to implement this, but some kind of a neutral consultant who doesn't have any ties to any companies and doesn't tell them this is what you need, And because and these days, from my point of view, only a holistic approach makes sense. And I think we can all agree on that. But what's holistic? Where do you put your focus? Where do you have open vectors? And as long as we don't have something like, in my world, the BSI would be that. But in Germany, the BSI, I don't know, let's say there's different opinion about these guys, which I can understand, because if you're being employed at the BSI, you're earning about a third than you can earn on the open market. So it's very difficult to get to the real good people there.
Benjamin,
and
I want to react to that also, maybe, because you also work a lot with institutional customers.
Yeah.
Well, Benjamin?
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay. So, they on top of it, struggling and dealing with an additional problem is to get the real people that are competent, that you just mentioned, Stefan. They're not willing to work under government conditions. So
in these structures.
That is not under the structures, not under these pays. I mean, you could be the most loyal person to your country. If you are a highly skilled cyber expert, you will not work for the 60,000 euros a year that your government is going to offer you for this position.
Actually, Benjamin, it's so true. I have a good friend who was a real idealist who said, I want to do something. I want to improve the general situation. I don't care about the money. I'm going to work for BSI. He lasted for 6 months.
That long?
Yeah.
Yeah, but same in healthcare. Well, same in the healthcare. I mean, that we have the same situation there too. Yeah.
Okay, so it means that there is a lack of maybe training institution, just like we are investing years to train surgeons that must work in hospitals after that. Do we need like also more training and also better public servants? Olaf?
First of all, I want to protect a little bit the spirit of a sales guy. I think we have the same. I think we have the same with consultant guys, because every consultant have the root. Somebody's coming out of the CM environment, somebody's coming from the EDR environment. So they have the roots and they have the ideas and the visions what they want to do. I think the only answer is really for the lack to fulfill this lack of competency on the customer side is using SOC services, because SOC service is a combination of integrated software environment of different vendors sold by different sales guys, and also a combination of services and know-how. So I think this is the answer. And if I take a look on the actual RFIs we are answering at the moment, 50% it's included building in SOC. Yeah, and I think that's the only thing you can do, because nobody really is able to answer. And in the last 10-12 years, I worked in 250 projects inside certs and SOCs all over Germany, big ones with 50 employees and little ones. And what you're seeing there is that nobody is really able to react and detect and neutralize in real time. So you need always a combination between software intelligence and people doing this. And only a software is really could be an answer to do something automatic or really in real time. The people always should to try to work in a forensic way, to adopt or to change or to make something better in the environment. Only the software is really able to work then 24 hours, 7 days per week in real time. That's
Can you
fact.
explain a little bit what you mean with SOC?
SOC, sorry. SOC is a Security Operations Center, which is, I told before, it's a combination between technology used, which is integrated, and also lots of people. They're really deep inside hopefully deep know-how in protecting companies against cyber attacks. That's what a SOC is doing every day. Yeah.
And the software intelligence, I would say, is only really helpful if you also have real intelligence in the room.
Yes.
So my question is, Olaf, if you're referring to a SOC, there's a bit of an old make or buy decision. Are you running your own SOC? Are you outsourcing it, and you're basically just buying MSSP services, which means Andre, managed security service provider. So basically, you pay someone else to run your SOC. So are you doing it yourself, or are you outsourcing it in this case? Because I think for most companies I come across, especially in Mittelstand, they just say, what, the SOC? How much does that cost? And I think therefore you do need a certain size to run your own SOC.
Yeah, no, not running your own SOC. That's true. That's why every enterprises who are offering SOC services, they should try to standardize their services, to industrialize their services, to make it much more easier and less expensive to buy and to use. Also for the customers you just talked about, the Mittelstand. And I think this will happen in the next years. And then, yeah, you're right, Benjamin. Then hopefully in this SOC team is sitting somebody who knows what to do. That's true. But if you bring, if you have a SOC team for several customers or several countries, then you have the, I don't know the English word, it's a Schwarm intelligence. That means you have the intelligence of all the information you have all around. And I think with this intelligence and with this, then also the try to automate something, to industrialize something, it's the only chance really to fight and against cyber attacks in the future. That's the fact.
Fabiula?
Yeah, I wanted to mention something that's actually very important, because obviously, I mean, there are different solutions out there, as you mentioned, Stefan, and most of them are, salespeople trying to sell something to you. What I think, like, it's missing, like, especially in Germany, or in general, like in Europe, is, education and awareness is a really, really big point. But especially going to like the main topic of how to educate employees, especially because they are one of like the biggest threats in a company. Because human error is actually like the easiest way to get through a cyber attack. So one of the things that I basically wanted to mention is that you can, in the end, implement, I don't know, like the most sophisticated cybersecurity solution that you want to have in your company. You can spend a lot of money on, doing penetration testing, even do a red team assessment, whatever you want. The problem is if you don't start even with the smaller things, like, for example, asking your employees to enable multi-factor authentication, or just, and they activate their screen lock while they are, away of their computer, or leaving their passwords like everywhere, like in sticky notes, then you have like we have already in Germany like a huge bigger problem than just which solutions we need to implement. Actually, it should start from like the management team, because especially in Mittelstand, they are aware that there are cybersecurity solutions, but they don't even know like what are the basic measures that they need to take care of, and if they know about it, they don't even really like have like the motivation to implement them. I've seen, for example, companies that they wanna. It's like cybersecurity is like getting to a doctor. You wanna basically implement a lot of stuff if you already got sick and you know that this is something that hurts. And then you spend a lot of money, and then you tell everyone that you want to do it, and then every employee will need to do it. But before that, it's like, hey, yeah, I know it can happen, but it hasn't happened to me. So why should I do it now? So I think that it starts like from there, like from the management team in the beginning. Also, doing a little bit more of education and awareness. But I think the human error is actually one like very, very huge thing that shouldn't go, should be taken into consideration. And yeah, as I said, in the end, you can implement ISO, you can implement like any different solution, SOC, or whatever you want. But if you don't have like this awareness and this motivation from the management team, and going down to the last employee that even has an access to your emails or to your Google Drive, then there's always going to be a way that someone can get into your systems.
Stefan, you wanted to react, or?
Yes, well, I think that's where we all agree that the awareness is one point, and it's not only on the base level, but really on the high management level also. I mean, it's always fancier to go with a nice car in front of than to secure your environment. Nobody sees that. I mean, you cannot see that, but prevention is all about not getting infected. Once you're attacked, I mean, it takes forever to get up and running and productive again for a company. And we're not talking about I pay money and then I get my data back, or then I'm up and running. I mean, it's the phone, it's the production, it's everything what's then not working. And I think even for the people in the IT, any IT leader has a high pressure on securing his environment, and to make sure, I think the awareness, and that's what I found out in the last few years, for any IT leader, it was sure that they have to do more, but then to get the budget and to implement everything, it takes time, and that's pretty hard. I mean, we're on the right way. That's what I think. I think that for sure, if you work for a company, then you're sure you want to sell it because you think it's the best product, I mean, that's normal. I mean, there's no neutral in my eyes anywhere. Just to get back to that, but for sure, if I stay with the company, I think the product is good and will help to secure the environment, you know. And I have talked with a lot of Mittelstand in the last year, and I was really surprised how diverse the opinions and the awareness is. And I got to say, really, they know their product much more, the products on the market. I'm surprised as much as they know at the moment, because they have to find out about a lot of products that are on the market, and the names are changing every time. I mean, what was called, I don't know, just antivirus years ago, it's now EDR. I mean, it's more sophisticated and can do much more and has to do much more. But, you know, it's like having a Duden all the time with you to get the new words, to know what's better now with the system. But I think really it's on the high level that we have to have the awareness that, okay, security is not something you can show, you know, it's something that is in the back, but makes you safe and productive.
I see. And what happens, let's say I have this ISO certification, I feel like I am a little bit better prepared against an attack, because an attack will happen. Like, it's not if, it's will. And then, Olaf, can you explain a little bit what will?
I think it's not only the certification. I think that's I'm really a fan of Fabiula, of your work, because especially for the lack of awareness, when you're implementing an information security management system and you consult the company to do this, then you're talking with the business, yeah, because you ask the business, okay, this data or this application, if it would stop or will lose it, how much cost us, how its partners for the business, not for security, not for the IT department, how much focus for your business? That's the question. And then you say, okay, maybe this application should run, maybe if it fails for 2 hours, no problem, maybe 1 day it's okay, but 2 days, horrible, and this costs we will have, or especially, if I lose this data, would be horrible cost and horrible a lack of convenience of our customers. So you get the awareness of the business, how important it is to talk about high availability and security. That's why the business of Fabiula is so important for us, because we as a Tehtris, we are only then the directors. We are the software who is trying to attack then the cyber attacks. But to tell the business why to buy this is the business of Fabiula. Thank you, Fabiula. Selling Tehtris.
I think
It's nice to hear.
we're again at this point of awareness. You know, first, the CISO is a very uncomfortable guy in a company, and there's always two types of CISOs: the ones who just claim, no worries, guys, I'll absorb the risk, and the other ones who are really uncomfortable and keep asking the management for additional budget. And management just claims, what's the ROI on this? And that's the second problem, because honestly, there is no ROI. Not until something really, really bad happens. And that's the same with your fire detection system. What's the ROI on your fire detection system? Hopefully there's none, ever. And this is something people don't really realize. And once they understand how much the damage can be, and I just saw a documentation on ZDF, it's always quite interesting to watch those, about a guy who was a distributor for plumbing equipment, and he was standing there close to tears, like, oh, we had this ransomware, we couldn't sell anything for 3 weeks, and this cost me 500,000 euros, and this is all so terrible. And I think you're a damn idiot, because you're building a high fence around your storage, like physical storage houses, but on the IT side, you're doing nothing. And just imagine where these days your real assets lie. Most of them are digital. And through digitalization these days, this has shifted so much, but the mindset of people hasn't. And that's a big problem.
But that's also because state infrastructure and the legal environment also hasn't changed very much. I mean, if somebody is jumping over your fence and stealing things, or is starting to work on your fence, let's start right there. You see somebody working on your fence, right. It's a criminal act, and there's measures taken against it. even your private security firm that is safeguarding your environment can go out and arrest the person.
Yep.
What do you do in the cyberspace? You fill out a BSI form and say something has happened.
I think it's a pseudo discussion, and if you talk to people who are really involved in this, and they start laughing if somebody talks about Industry 4.0. I remember Angela Merkel walking around on what was the show in Hannover called again? Sorry.
Hannover Messe.
No, yeah, exactly. And everybody was all about Industry 4.0, just in time, and we're producing and everything is connected. And if you talk to someone who's actually in production, this guy will tell you, well, this production street was built for a lifespan of 18 years. It's 14 years old now. It's still running on an NT 4.0 server. And the only thing we can do is completely air gap it in terms of air gap. So there's no connection to the outside world. So it's completely isolated. And this is our status of Industry 4.0 right now. And I think there's this one discussion going on with people trying to reflect a perception of, yeah, we're really modern. But if you really go to the basics, it's ridiculous. And that's why I call it a pseudo discussion in many cases.
Maybe I would love also to hear a bit, Benjamin, about another topic, because what you said is also, it starts like, we don't know, like, should it start from the top or from the bottom of the pyramid in terms of information and new measures? And there are big differences between Germany, France, and the Nordics. And for example, Benjamin, you told me that there is something called total defense concept, where it looks like some countries take the topic cybersecurity to a completely different level, right?
Well, it's a general security concept, and we were talking about this in regards to Sweden, because when you go there, the looks at the current situation we are in this world is probably very different from a conversation we have in Germany about rising energy prices. So the general total defense concept of Sweden has a military, but also an infrastructure angle. So it includes plans on how to maintain infrastructure and communication, given there's no electricity and no communication channels as we know them available. So what are the alternative means? What is the infrastructure? How will everything still proceed? How will things be secured? But also on a military angle, it would mobilize within 48 hours 1.2 million people in Sweden willing to defend and fight for their country. And if you take this in an analogy to Germany, I think within the last 20 years, we didn't even had 8 million people going through the military service. So we wouldn't even have 10% of our people educated to do so. And it is also on the cyber front, a complete different mindset that you would find in Finland, Sweden, Estonia, Norway, but even Denmark. Pretty different to Germany, where we, in our coalition agreement last year, even put in a sentence saying that the government is strictly against hackbacks, but doesn't have any answer to actually how actively defending our infrastructure, while Americans, Brits, and others in this world have a clear standing. It very much reminded me on the conversation that we do have to leave nuclear energy, but we didn't have any alternatives. Yeah, it's if we have an alternative, I'm happy to jump on an alternative. But if there's no alternative, why would I just generally say we wouldn't do that? Just because out of pure German pacifism, we decided to put this in a coalition agreement. And I had this conversation with many people that are involved in the government now that probably would have had a strong different opinion, but they just said it's not possible to have a different point of view at this moment, last year, coalition agreement, for something like this. And in Sweden, it's probably very different. You could have seen that also in the process of arming Ukraine, when we were still talking about sending 5,000 helmets from East German times. Sweden was supplying Ukraine with anti-tank weapons. It's just a different mindset that you find in the way of willingness to defend their own infrastructure.
So you think that nevertheless in the future there will be, and can you also maybe define what hackback means? And do you think this will nevertheless in the future happen, maybe with the next elections?
Well, it's a general debate I think we're going to have in Germany about all of the possibilities in terms of cyber measures. But again, I mean, in law enforcement, it's very easy to arrest a person, to go back to the fence analogy, to arrest a person that is right now going against the fence, or the organization that is orchestrating the steal in the physical sites. We have police forces, and it's very simple to educate them. If you would take this analogy to the cyber domain, it is very complicated because we just talked about this before. You need very highly skilled people that actually are knowing what they are doing. So even if a government would take the stand of saying we want to provide more active cyber measures against our attackers, who should do that? It's a matter of education, of skills, of people. Not every country has budgets available like the UK or America to put up people and train people accordingly to do so. But it's a space where there's no governing law, there's no case law, there's no proper active measures that can be taken. We just sitting there and watching. And as you previously said, it's not a question if cyber attacks happen. They happen all the time, and we just don't sit there and do nothing about it.
Mm-hmm. I see. Anybody wants to react?
I think yes, I think we are not so bad than in Germany than Benjamin told before in from a public environment. As for example, the very important for us in Germany have been the IT-Sicherheitsgesetz, the IT German law. Started in 2016, then in 2018, then BSI sent the first papers for the for the critical environment like water, electricity, hospitals, and all this kind of stuff. And then they started to do something because the difference between, for example, an ISO certification and CRITIS is that the reaction on the criticality of an environment or a data is different from the for example, as you are in a Mittelstands company, you can say, okay, I understood the criticality and I have now 3 things to do. I can change something technically or organizationally, or I say, okay, I take the risk on my own shoulders, or I try to get insurance to get something paid later if something happens. So if you are in a critical environment like electricity or hospitals and this kind of stuff, then as an company leader, you're not allowed to say, I take the risk or I insure the risk. You have to do something really to reduce the risk for your IT environment, because the critical environment is not only for running a business, the critical environment is for supporting people in their homes with electricity, with water. So it's much more different view of how to work with the criticality and the risk. And I think this was very important to really do something in Germany to protect our infrastructure. And this really happened. And also the BSI now in June sent out a new paper, a new guidance, what to do. And this was also very important really to use state-of-the-art technology to protect this critical environment. And this has nothing to do with the lack of competency inside the BSI or somewhere. They really did a good job, I think, at this time. And also there's also a change at the moment in the behavior and the thinking in Germany in the political environment. For example, the BSI, the first time in their history, they told us, okay, don't stop buying Kaspersky. Yeah, they never said something like this before. The next thing is, at the moment, the government thinks about really officially don't use Huawei for our critical telecommunication environment, for example. And this is all reactions what we at the moment doing really to protect Germany and our infrastructure we have. So I think this is an important change in the mind also by our Bundeskanzler and all the ministers, and coming down to all these public environments at the moment.
But this is great. But if you look at it from a stoplight angle, all these measures and all these resolutions are perfect for the stage green and yellow. But let's take a real-life example of a very important food supply company that gets ransomware. The ransomware gang actually is Russian. They want money. Now, I mean, under the current sanction lists and stuff, you would be guilty sending money to those people even as well. To take countermeasures, you would be guilty as well. But you can ring up the government and you speak to people and they said, well, you can send money. Said, well, can you stand in front of the public next week and tell them there's no more frozen pizza in the supermarket because we were not able to send money, and we were also not able to fight against the attackers. So there's a huge vacuum of legislation that has to be done to actually empower critical infrastructure to do also something about it when they, in the time of need, to gain back control over the infrastructure. So talking about the red light of the stoplight here, you have to do all your homework in the beginning. That's absolutely clear. And there's a lot of things to be done to assure you never get into that stage. But if it happens, there needs to be proper guidance so companies feel safe and know what to do, that they don't risk even more that's already at stake when they actually want to do something about it.
And do you feel like there is also... sorry, go ahead.
That's what I mean. If we're having a pseudo discussion, we are talking about these things which are all being implemented on paper, but the reality is a completely different one. For instance, 50% of the towns in Germany right now don't have a disaster recovery plan for a blackout.
Yeah.
Let alone anything when it comes to IT security. We don't, and I think, as long as the CDU is suing a white hat hacker, so this is a hacker of the good ones, just quick explanation. Hackers are very easy to recognize. The ones with the black hats are the bad ones, and the white hats are the good ones. So, so if the CDU for responsible disclosure, which means responsible disclosure, I'm an ethical white hat hacker. I discover a vulnerability or a potential exploit of an app. In this case, it was the app of a CDU. We all know the CDU, biggest German party, used to be. I don't know what's going on in the future, but anyhow, and she discovered it. Her name is Lilith Wittmann, and she's a white hat hacker. And a responsible disclosure is something, if you're telling someone, by the way, your app has a vulnerability, you better fix this. Out of good faith, I'm telling you this. And she got sued. So as long as we have this kind of mindset here on various levels, inside our government, in and you name it, things are very difficult to change. And
like,
I think
on your front door is open and going to jail for it. Yeah.
That's what I keep saying, just transfer all these things to the physical world. And you see how ridiculous it is. So your front door's wide open, nobody's home, and the police drives by and does nothing about it. Everybody would find that strange. But in the cyberspace, everybody just takes it for granted for some reason. And this is the general mindset change we need. Awareness, education, and change of mindset.
Do you feel there is also a difference between France, Germany, and maybe also other countries when it gets to approaching cybersecurity?
Sure. A big one. If you take the US, for instance, they I think it was 2019, if I'm not mistaken, they established CISA, which is a governmental vulnerability scanner. Just imagine you could call a German state authority and tell them, well, please scan my infrastructure. Thank you. Oh, it's free. Great. And yes, there's a big difference, And And this is something I think we're just still living. Das Internet ist Neuland für uns, you know. The cyberspace is still a new country for us. That's a statement from Angela Merkel, unfortunately not too long ago, on CeBIT in Hannover, I think. So, and everybody was laughing their butts off about this statement. But this is still the mindset we have in all areas. And we were talking about KHZG, you know, you were mentioning it initially, Andre. Krankenhaus, Zukunftsgesetz, something. Yeah. And you know, we're not even getting an e-prescription right for 15 years now. And we keep shoveling money on the fire. We keep shoveling money on the fire, and it still doesn't work. And I think it's lack of competence in the people writing the scope for these things. That's where it starts, you know?
And yet, for example, Olaf, if I understand correctly, I thought that, for example, Germany had more regulations about cybersecurity than France. Or is there a country that you feel has a better approach to the topic?
I think we have, in both countries, we have the same IT environments. So we are using Microsoft, we're using Linux, we're using cloud services. So that's not the difference. I think the difference between French security projects and German security projects is just that the French, they don't have so much regulations like ISO or like CRITIS or like TSAX or like BAET for banking groups, for insurance. So that means that if you take a look on the XDR environment, which means it's a combination between EDR and SIEM. In France, they take much more look on the EDR part. So just really, also EDR again, detect and response, endpoint security, yes, and the SIEM, because the SIEM is always also used for compliance, for reportings, what the audience want to see. That means that in Germany we have much more EDR and SIEM projects in combination, and in France much more EDR projects at the moment. That's what I see a difference. I think we don't have so much big cultural difference. I work very closely with my French colleagues together. I think that we are all European. That's not a problem. But maybe the difference is in the behavior, especially when I listen to the discussion last 10 minutes between Benjamin and Stefan. Maybe the Germans, we are always saying, okay, everything is bad at the moment and the government have to protect us. So maybe the difference in France is a little bit different. They say, okay, it's the living is not so bad. I have a fantastic wine, the sun is shining, and also then I am responsible for my security. I think this is something we should change in the mindset in all Germans' head that sometimes living is not good, but you are responsible for your own IT security, for your own living. And then that's maybe we should really change in a global way, just to use Stefan words.
Maybe back to Fabiula also, because it's not only about France and Germany. Fabiula, you were at the Web Summit in Portugal just a few days ago. Was cybersecurity also a topic? And what's your feedback?
Yeah, sure, definitely. Definitely was a topic. Like, there was even just like a basically security stand or security, stage where people can talk about different topics. And what I saw there, especially in the Web Summit, is that everyone is aware right now of what's happening. You know, like all of these attacks that are happening. Like it became kind of like I would say something that you already expect that will happen. You just want to know like what can you do against it, and also like also for example like incident response when you were discussing before, like how can you prepare for this? Like what are the next steps after something like this happens? And I think this is where people are coming now, and also what I saw from the Web Summit, like obviously getting through, the baselines of understanding what do you need in terms of your cybersecurity roadmap, which, solutions are out there, but also like understanding the point of smaller companies, or especially in Web Summit, it was mostly about, like a lot of cloud-based companies or startups, scale-ups that were there. I think their main I would say, point what's where they have like a huge question mark as exactly that, like what happens if I get hacked, like how can I deal with this. And yeah, I mean, the solutions that are out there are very sophisticated nowadays, and there are different things that you can use to make it happen. You just need to find, like, obviously the right solution for the current company. One of the things that I still think that was very interesting is many companies, they are aware of the cyber attacks, but they don't, as we mentioned before, similar to, for example, healthcare or like more traditional companies, they don't have the budget. So this is a huge issue. Like, I talked to some companies in Portugal, they were telling me, like, we also have customers there. They were telling me, like, hey, we actually need, for example, to do our ISO certification. But yeah, it's like something very, very expensive to do. Or for example, if you want to do a pen test or anything else, there were like even companies that were getting like grants from the government to get, you know, started with it. So there are some incentives. Also, I know in Munich, for example, in Bavaria, there's like this digital bonus program where companies can get, you know, basically a grant, like 50% of the cost back for you know, implementing, for example, ISO 27001. So yeah, there are some initiatives where the government is trying to help, but there's still like a lot of, I would say, from the from the need that the companies have, they still have like this budget gap that they want to know, like, why do I need to spend so much time and also so much costs on this? Like, how much ROI will it bring me back? And I think that comes back to the education part, which I always tell them, like, hey, if you implement these things, you're not gonna basically the possibility that you get hacked is way lower, which means that it will increase the trust of your customers, right? Even, for example, with ISO or any other topic like penetration testing, just showing this to your customers make the sales process faster. So this is normally how you can just educate like the management team, which is not 100%, I would say, incentivized only on security, but also on revenue growth, to at least consider, you know, spending more in cybersecurity, because they know that the ROI is basically pretty much after one or two customers, they can get their money back of what they invested in terms of cybersecurity. What I've seen as well is that in the US, this is like we are way behind in Europe. Like we're also, you know, having some. We're actually opening an office in the UK as well, and we've seen that the UK is actually way further than Europe in general. But the US is like really far in terms of cybersecurity, and like it's kind of like everyone knows that this is something that needs to be implemented. It's already part of every single budget of every year, and the management teams knows exactly like which solutions are the ones that need to be implemented. And this, I think, in Germany or in general in Europe, is still kind of like a very blurry line of what do I actually need to implement and how much budget can I spend? Can I actually save something on this? So yeah, those are the things that I've been seeing so far.
I think that concerns changes. Maybe we're not so open to changes like in America. Everything has always changed so fast. I mean, maybe here we're more stuck to it's my old car is still running, so why should I get a new one? You know. So that's sometimes a difficulty.
But Stefan, on the other hand, Stefan Bange, CybelAngel, I thought for you didn't have any problem to sell, yeah? So is it hard or easy to sell? You're muted. You're muted. We cannot hear you.
Oh, here we go. I think it's that's a very broad question. You know, it always depends on is it hard or is it easy to sell? I think it always depends on your target group, who you're speaking to, what their actually pain points, what their pain points are. Do you have a solution to their problems? You know, the whole sales 101. In general, I think it comes down to awareness again, because most people don't really understand the implications of a cyber attack these days still. You know, as I said, the plumbing equipment distribution guy who just doesn't understand if he's the victim of a ransomware attack or whatever attack. Everybody just talks about ransomware, but there's a whole bunch of stuff out there. That it inflicts his production as well, or his revenue stream as well, as if half of his employees just stay home. And this is something that most people don't comprehend these days. They just don't get it. And the less they get it, the harder it is to sell. I think that's a bit of a generalization, I'm aware, but and I think there's no. And I've worked internationally for quite some years. I don't really see a big difference in nationalities, to be honest, because if you look at some American companies, for instance, a lot of them just do threat hunting and they think it's fine. But I'm getting into details. Anyhow, I think there's no big difference between France and Germany when it comes to awareness. I think it's very company specific, and it comes down to the culture of the company itself and the way the CISO is able to get his or her points through to senior management, and the way, does it rain budget or doesn't it? And that's a bit of a what does the guy with the golden pen think about it? Does he sign the purchase order? Do they know what could be the implication of an attack? And I don't really think that it's national specific, to be honest. The way to conduct business sometimes is a little different because there's always national specifics. If you waltz into a Swiss meeting and you perform it or you hold it at the German speed, they perceive you as hectic because they're just, it's a different way of doing business, not better or worse. So there are differences in conducting business, but not in the matter itself, if you ask me.
And what do you think about, what I hear also in terms of projects from, let's say, at a country level or European level, is, for example, the implementation of a cyber score, whether it is for objects or services. What do you think about this initiative?
I think in general, it's a good thing to raise awareness. But in specific, it's a very neat way to make a lot of money, especially when you start cooperating with insurance companies. And if you have a great marketing and a great B2B model, I'm not naming any specifics, but there's companies out there who issue a sort of a security score kind of thing, but you pay them a whole ton of money to send people to look at your infrastructure. I'm not sure how realistic that really is to get a certain score because, one machine is enough to attack a company and they don't really incorporate the human factor, if you ask me. So all these ratings, again, it's not an independent consultancy. That's what you should keep in mind.
Anybody else wants to react on that cyber score, security score? I don't know how to name that.
I think the most important point was simply the human factor. That's what I meant also before with the software intelligence and the real intelligence. In the end, it's depending on the people behind it, whether it's the user or the IT security team that have to be aware and well educated and up to the latest level. If you set up the IT infrastructure in the company in the 80s and you've been in the company since the 80s, doesn't make you automatically the most senior IT person in the team. And I think that's something you eventually have to challenge because in this space, it's about depth of knowledge, not length of experience. And I think that's a crucial factor that usually HR and organizations completely underestimate. It's probably the 27-year-old coming in doing IT security is probably much better than the 47-year-old who's in the same company since 25 years, started out with IT security.
I see.
That's a very German approach. With this guy's been here the longest, and obviously he has the longest. He has the most experience.
And we have always done it like this, and that's why we will always do it
exactly.
Like
this. Anybody else wants to react?
Yeah, I think to measure a majority of an organization in case of IT security is a good thing, and I think it would help us to get more awareness. And also I like measuring things, because then you can show there's an advance in your process when you're doing something. And we are also trying to help our customers in measuring their maturity in security environments, just to give them also a chance to get the money from the management. If you're just talking about, okay, we need 2 million more to protect our company, that's not helping really to get the budget, but to show him, okay, here we are today at this majority level compared with other companies in the same branch, for example. And if we do this in the next 2 years, then we can achieve this KPI, for example. I think this is a really good thing to get an awareness also for the management, and for the CISO the chance to give a kind of PowerPoint slides with numbers and KPIs and a vision to the management. So that's why I like measurements, whoever is doing this.
Fabiula?
Yeah, I think it's the same. Like measuring like companies according to score is definitely something that will basically be more important in the future. Like right now, for example, some of the things that we're trying to develop, which is asked, for example, by many customers, is that you can already like show, for example, like basically real-time security reports of where you normally stand in terms of security. Like if you have your GDPR compliance, ISO 27001, like if you have a pen test, that you can have like a portal where companies can request that, especially like customers. But even like putting a score on it would make it like good for the management team or for the customers to show like how competitive like are they, like what advantages do they have. And I think like also what Olaf mentioned, like this vision, right? Because that's just like the beginning, like that's level 1. But then you need to show them like, okay, if you want to go to level 3, which is, you know, like a very robust cybersecurity infrastructure where you know that everything is like being taken care of. You need to follow specific standards and specific steps to do that. So showing them that vision and like where you are in terms of a score would definitely help to create like this education that is still, or this awareness, you know, that is still missing, and give a little bit more of motivation to the management to know, okay, if I want to become like this, you know, big fish, like I need to implement this, and then it gives them the motivation to do it.
I see. Maybe one last question, because it's already 1 hour and a half, about European regulations like the Digital Market Act and other things like that. Is it something that impacts your business now and in the near future, or not at all?
I'd say
yeah, you're okay. No,
go
go
ahead.
No, actually, I mean, for us, it's like obviously it impacts it, and it impacts it in actually in a good way, because you know, in the case that there are more regulations, then it's kind of like not only like the willingness to do things, but rather you actually need to implement this, because otherwise you're not, you know, compliant with the law. So it definitely helps to kind of like also bring this not only awareness but also the motivation also of the companies to do it. For example, for the DIGA requirements is a huge thing, like since last year, or for example now TISAX for automotive it's starting in the beginning of next year, that every vendor in the automotive industry will need to basically comply with TISAX, and this kind of like obviously helps companies to start kind of like, you know, bringing their security to that level as well.
Stefanie?
I think that regulations is good, but yeah, in France, for example, the regulation for the healthcare and everything to implement softwares or specific solutions is a little bit different. They precise the name and everything, while in Germany it's more vague. So they just know they have to do something. Then it's getting complicated. I mean, the problem is really that every company has so different standards, and then to get them on a level, and until they get the money, even when we're talking about the Krankenhauszukunftsgesetz, I know I've talked to customers who still are waiting for the most basic stuff to implement, and then they still don't have the money, and nothing is running at the moment, and they're still waiting, and it's taking forever. So I think regulation is good, but everything has its good and bad sides.
Okay. Maybe we can make a last round conclusion, last words from all of you. And if somebody has questions, don't hesitate to add something in the chat. Otherwise, we can simply make a wrap up. Do you want to give some last words and 1% each?
Yes, maybe. First of all, I think the mix of the team today in the meeting, so thank you for the invitation, is fantastic, because we can start with Fabiula, with the certification, with setting the standards and getting the awareness for criticality for das Unternehmen and for the company. And for example, we are then just delivering a solution as software to automate and to fight against cyber attacks. And I think we never can work alone, fight alone against the world at the moment. So we have to work in a team. I think that's a good round today. And again, thank you for being a part of this today.
Who is next? Last few words for everybody.
I can go next. So I think the conclusion is essentially that we need proper understanding, which means more education and more empowerment, and maybe not more regulation.
Well, then I follow just your words and say that's it. We need more awareness, but I see we're on a good way. We're talking about a lot of things much more, and everybody has a little bit more awareness. So I'm really looking positive in the future, and thank you for the round and the nice discussion and the opportunity.
We still have Fabiula and Stefan.
Yeah, I can just, say something here. Yeah, so from my side, I think the combination of, the speakers today kind of shows how important it is that you don't only focus on one thing, but you actually need to focus on different levels of security. And this is part of something that every company should have as well.
I think I've already said a whole bunch of stuff around in the last 90 minutes, so I'll take the shot. It was really very interesting. Thanks for the invite, and thanks to all of you.
Okay, so thank you everybody. Really, I learned so much preparing this lunch talk with all of you, and also during this live and seeing everybody interact. It's a completely different feeling, and I hope that people who are listening to us live or in replay will also learn a few things. And if they don't have yet a cybersecurity strategy for their company organization, they will maybe it will enlighten them and makes them get some more motivation to take care of that. Thank you everybody, and see you for next lunch talk. We will talk about data. How do you handle business intelligence and data? We will do that mid of December. See you soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.